We paint this story on the walls of nurseries, giraffes leaning out of a little boat, a smiling rainbow, a duck. It is, by a wide margin, the darkest story in the book of Genesis, and almost every detail you remember about it is wrong. The text never says 2 of every animal, not really. For some of them, it says 14. The rain lasts 40 days. But nobody in this story is on that boat for 40 days. They are on it for more than a year. The man at the center of it never speaks. Not once. Not while he builds. Not while the world drowns. His first recorded words come at the very end. And they are a curse. The boat is not shaped like a boat. It has the proportions of a temple. And the rainbow is not a rainbow. In Hebrew, it is a weapon. His name was Noah, and the 4 chapters that hold his story are the most carefully built 4 chapters in Genesis. Every number is exact. Every date is logged. Nothing here is decoration. Here is what I want to show you. The flood is not a story about a boat. It is Genesis chapter 1, run backwards, and then run again. So let me set the scene. Before the flood, Genesis gives us a list. Chapter 5. 10 generations, from Adam down, names, ages, sons. And after almost every single one, the same 3 words fall like a hammer. And he died. And he died. And he died. 8 times. Death is winning. That is the sound of chapter 5. Then, near the bottom of the list, a man named Lamech has a son, and he does something none of the others did. He explains the name. Out of the ground that the Lord has cursed, this one shall bring us relief. Relief. In Hebrew, that sound is close to the boy's name, Noah. A father looks at a newborn and says, maybe this one ends the curse. Hold that hope. The book is going to test it. Because chapter 6 opens with 4 of the strangest verses in the Bible. The sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive, and they took as their wives any they chose. Sons of God. The text does not stop to explain who they are. It assumes you already know. And then, a word that has haunted readers for 3,000 years. The Nephilim. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. Mighty men. Men of renown. Heroes in the oldest and coldest sense of the word. Who are they? Honestly, the text will not say. The oldest Jewish reading, and the one the writers of the New Testament seem to lean on, says these are rebel divine beings. A later reading says the sons of God are simply the godly line of Seth, marrying into the violent line of Cain. A third says they are power-drunk kings, taking whatever women they wanted because nobody could stop them. You will not settle that today. Neither will I. But notice what all 3 readings share. A boundary is being crossed. Heaven and earth. Strong and weak. Something that was supposed to stay separate is bleeding together. And in Genesis, separation is not a technicality. Separation is how the world was made. Then God speaks and sets a clock. His days shall be 120 years. Readers still argue about that number. A new ceiling on human life or a countdown? 120 years until the water comes. Either way, time is now running out. And then comes the verse. The one that explains everything that follows. Every intention of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. Read that slowly. Not some intentions, everyone, not sometimes, continually, not the actions, the thoughts behind the actions. This is not a world with a crime problem. This is a world with a heart problem, all the way down. And then Genesis says something about God that should stop you cold. The Lord regretted that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him to his heart. Grieved to his heart. The same word family as the name Noah. The boy was named for comfort. And here is God refusing to be comforted. Whatever else the flood is, it does not begin in rage. It begins in grief. God is not a landlord evicting tenants. He is a parent looking at what his children have become. And then, one sentence, "But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord." Notice the order. That comes first. Only after the favor does the text describe him. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation. Noah walked with God. Walked with God. The same phrase used of Enoch, the man who never died. Favor first. Character second. Even here, in the oldest story, grace runs ahead of goodness. Then the diagnosis lands 3 times in 3 verses. The earth was corrupt. The earth was filled with violence. God saw the earth, and behold, it was corrupt. That word, violence, is Hamas in Hebrew. Cruelty. Plunder. The strong eating the weak. The earth is not being destroyed for unbelief. It is being destroyed for violence. I have determined to make an end of all flesh, for the earth is filled with violence. And then God does something he will only ever do twice in the whole Bible. He hands a human being a set of blueprints. Exact dimensions, exact materials, exact number of floors. The only other time he does this, it is for the tabernacle, his own dwelling place. Sit with that. The ark is built to temple specifications. Make yourself an ark of gopher wood. Nobody today knows what gopher wood is. The word appears exactly once in the Bible and then never again. Cover it inside and out with pitch. Tar. Waterproofing. And the Hebrew verb for covering it in tar shares its root with the word Israel will later use for atonement. To cover. That is what atonement literally means. To cover something over so it can survive judgment. Now the numbers. 300 cubits long, 50 wide, 30 high. A cubit is roughly 18 inches, the length of a forearm. So, about 450 feet long, 75 feet wide, 45 feet tall. A wooden building longer than a football field. Nothing that size would be built in wood again for thousands of years. And here is the thing about that shape. 6:1, length to width. That is not a shape built to go anywhere. It has no sail, no rudder, no oars. It is a shape built to float and not tip. A box, a container. In fact, the Hebrew word for it is not the word for ship. It is a word meaning chest or box, and it is used in only one other place in the whole Bible. The basket that carries baby Moses down the Nile, waterproofed with pitch. A small box holding a child, sealed with tar, floating through deadly water to save a people. Genesis did that on purpose. 3 decks, lower, second, and third. A door in the side. 1 opening for light near the top. 3 levels. Like the 3 zones of the world God made. The heavens, the earth, and the waters below. The ark is a little world. A world in a box. Then God says a word he has never said before in the Bible. I will establish my covenant with you. Covenant. Right there, in chapter 6. The first time that word appears in Scripture. Everything the Bible will later build on that word starts here, in the rain. Then the animals. And here is where tradition and text part company. Chapter 6 says 2 of every sort, male and female. That is the general command. But chapter 7 gets specific. And the picture changes. Take with you 7 pairs of all clean animals, and a pair of the animals that are not clean. 7 pairs, 14 animals, not 2. And 7 pairs of the birds of the heavens as well. 2 by 2 is the nursery version. The text is more careful than that. And there is a reason. A reason you will not understand until the water goes back down. Because if you only bring 2 of a clean animal and then you sacrifice 1, you have just ended a species. God is not only saving the world, He is packing for what the world will need on the other side. Then the verse that closes chapter 6. Noah did this. He did all that God commanded him. That is his whole character in one line. He does not argue. He does not bargain like Abraham will. He does not even answer. Noah never says a word. He is 600 years old, and the sky is still perfectly clear. In 7 days I will send rain on the earth 40 days and 40 nights. 7 days of warning, 7 days of loading, 7 days of neighbors watching. Genesis does not tell us what the neighbors said. It does not give us one scene of mockery. The story is far more restrained than our imagination of it. Then how many people went in? Count them. Noah, his wife, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and the 3 wives of his sons. 8, out of a whole world. 8, and the New Testament remembers that number exactly. 8 persons brought safely through water. Then comes the date, and the date is the point. In the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, on the 17th day of the month. That is not how myths talk. That is how a ship's log talks. Genesis wants you to keep a calendar, so keep one. On that day, all the fountains of the great deep burst forth, and the windows of the heavens were opened. Stop. That one sentence is the whole theology of the flood. Go back to Genesis chapter 1, day 2. God separates the waters above from the waters below. Day 3, He gathers the waters below, and dry land appears. Creation, in Genesis, is God pushing the water back and making a space where life can breathe. And now, the water is coming back. From above, and from below. The flood is not a storm. The flood is the walls coming down. It is creation, unmade. It is Genesis chapter 1, played in reverse. The world is returning to what it was before day 2. Dark water over everything. And then a single line that carries more weight than the rain. And the Lord shut him in. Noah did not close the door. God closed the door, which means the door is sealed from the outside. Noah cannot open it, and nobody outside can either. That one gesture is mercy and terror in the same motion. He is safe, and the day of opening it is over. 40 days, 40 nights. The rain does not stop. The waters rise. The high mountains under the whole heaven are covered. And here is where almost everyone gets the timeline wrong. The rain lasts 40 days. But the waters do not go down after 40 days. And the waters prevailed on the earth 150 days, 150. 5 months of gray water to the horizon with nowhere to land. And notice what the text refuses to show you. There is no scene outside the ark, no drowning crowds, no screaming. The camera stays in the box. Genesis will not turn the death of a world into a spectacle, just water and wood and silence and time. And then, at the exact center of the story, everything turns on 3 words. But God remembered Noah. Remembered, not because God had forgotten. In Hebrew, to remember is to act on a promise. It is the hinge. Everything before that line is water rising. Everything after it is water falling. And look at what God does next. And God made a wind blow over the earth. A wind, in Hebrew, ruach, wind, breath, spirit. It is the exact same word, in the exact same posture, as Genesis chapter 1, verse 2. The Spirit of God hovering over the face of the waters, before the world began. The uncreation is finished, and the recreation has just started. The fountains of the deep close. The windows of the heavens shut. The rain is restrained, and the waters begin, slowly, to go down. On the 17th day of the 7th month, the ark comes to rest. Count it. Exactly 5 months. Exactly 150 days from the first drop. And the ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. Mountains. Plural. Read it again. Genesis does not name a peak. Ararat is a region, an ancient kingdom far to the north. Mount Ararat is a place on a modern map. The Bible only ever says the mountains of Ararat. The ark rests. But the world is still drowned. 2.5 more months pass before the tops of the mountains are even visible. Then Noah waits 40 more days, and he opens the window, and he sends out a raven, a blackbird, and an unclean one. It went to and fro until the waters were dried up. It never comes back. A raven eats carrion. A raven can rest anywhere on anything floating. It has no reason to return. So Noah sends a dove, and the dove comes back because she found no place to set her foot. Read that line again. Nowhere in all the world to put down 1 foot. That is the whole flood in 7 words. So he put out his hand and took her and brought her into the ark with him. That is the tenderest sentence in the chapter. A hand reaching out of the dark for one small tired bird. He waits 7 days. He sends her again. And she comes back in the evening. And in her beak is a freshly plucked olive leaf. Not a branch. A leaf. Green. New. Growing. Somewhere down there, under the retreating water, something is alive and reaching for the light. 3,000 years later, the world still uses that image for peace. He waits 7 more days. He sends her a 3rd time, and she does not come back. That is the good news. She has somewhere else to be now. So Noah removes the covering of the ark, and he looks out, and the ground is drying. And here is the most extraordinary thing he does in the whole story. Nothing. The door is right there. The land is right there. And Noah does not move. He sits in the box for almost 2 more months, waiting. He went in when God said, "Go in." He is not coming out until God says, "Come out." Then, at last, then God said to Noah, "Go out from the ark." Now let us add up the whole calendar. Because almost nobody knows this number. They entered on the 17th day of the 2nd month, in Noah's 600th year. They walked out on the 27th day of the 2nd month in his 601st. 1 year and 10 days, about 370 days inside a wooden box with every animal on earth. Not 40 days. 40 was only the rain. And God's first command on the far side is a command you have heard before. Be fruitful and multiply on the earth. That is Genesis chapter 1. Word for word, spoken over Adam on day 6. The waters have parted. Dry land has appeared. The creatures come out to fill it. And a man stands on empty ground and hears the words that started the world. This is not a rescue. This is a second creation. And Noah is a second Adam. And the very first thing this second Adam does is build. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord. The first altar in the Bible. Nobody has built one before this page. And took some of every clean animal and every clean bird, and offered burnt offerings on the altar. And now the 7 pairs make sense. He could afford this. God had planned for it a year ago. The animals were never only cargo. Some of them were provision for worship. And when the Lord smelled the pleasing aroma, the Lord said in his heart. And what he says is the strangest, most merciful sentence in the whole account. I will never again curse the ground because of man. Good. But listen to the reason he gives. For the intention of man's heart is evil from his youth. Wait. That is the same diagnosis that caused the flood. Back in chapter 6, the evil of the human heart was the reason to send the water. Here in chapter 8, the evil of the human heart is the reason never to send it again. The same evidence. The opposite verdict. God is saying, in effect, water cannot fix this. Drowning the problem does not remove the problem. The heart came off the boat. It walked down the ramp with them. So the promise does not rest on humanity getting better. It rests on God deciding to bear with us. While the earth remains, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. Every ordinary morning since is a fulfillment of that line. Then comes the covenant. And it is unlike anything you expect. I establish my covenant with you and your offspring after you. And then God widens it, and with every living creature that is with you, the birds, the livestock, every beast of the earth. This covenant is not just for people. Never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of a flood. And notice what is missing. There are no conditions. Noah is not asked to promise anything. He is not asked to obey anything to keep it. God swears. God alone. The man just stands there and receives it. And then God gives it a sign. And the sign is not what you were taught. I have set my bow in the cloud, and it shall be a sign of the covenant. My bow. In Hebrew, that word is keshet, and of the roughly 70 times keshet appears in the Hebrew Bible, it almost always means one thing: an archer's bow, a weapon of war. Only here, in these 3 verses, does it mean the arc of colored light in the sky. So picture what the ancient reader pictured. Not a friendly stripe of color. A war bow. God's own war bow. Hung up in the clouds, unstrung, set down, and pointed away from the earth. It is the image of a warrior hanging his weapon on the wall. And there is one more turn. Who is the sign actually for? When the bow is in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant. I will see it. God says the rainbow is there for him to look at, not a note taped to your fridge to reassure you, a knot tied in the finger of God, which is a very human, very gentle way of saying this promise does not depend on your memory. It depends on His. So the first covenant in the Bible is global, unconditional, everlasting, and its sign belongs to God. Every covenant after this one, with Abraham, with Moses, with David, is standing on this floor. And that is where a children's book would end. Rainbow. Fade out. The end. Genesis does not end there. Genesis has a few more verses that nobody paints on a nursery wall. The sons of Noah who went forth from the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And then, in a quiet parenthesis, the text drops a landmine. Ham was the father of Canaan. Remember that. Genesis just told you where this is going. Noah began to be a man of the soil, and he planted a vineyard. A man of the soil, working the ground, planting a garden. The second Adam, in his second Eden. He drank of the wine and became drunk and lay uncovered in his tent. And there it is, the fruit of the garden, the fall of the man. Adam ate, Noah drank. Both ended up uncovered and ashamed. The new world is 1 chapter old, and it already has the old wound in it. And Ham, the father of Canaan, saw the nakedness of his father and told his 2 brothers outside. What exactly happened in that tent is one of the oldest arguments in biblical interpretation. Some read it plainly, he looked, and then he went out and made a joke of it. Others hear an idiom in that phrase and suspect something far darker. The text is deliberately spare. What it clearly condemns is this: he saw and he told. A son found his father exposed, and instead of covering him, he went out and talked. Then the brothers. And this is one of the most beautiful sentences in Genesis. Then Shem and Japheth took a garment, laid it on both their shoulders, and walked backward and covered the nakedness of their father. Their faces were turned backward, and they did not see their father's nakedness. They walked backwards. They refused to look. They cover him. And back in Eden, when Adam and Eve knew they were naked, do you remember what God did? He made them garments, and he clothed them, covering shame instead of exposing it. That is the family resemblance Genesis is looking for. And then Noah wakes up, and Noah at last speaks. 900 years of life, 4 chapters of story. And these are his first recorded words. Cursed be Canaan. A servant of servants shall he be to his brothers. Now be very careful here. Because this verse has been abused for centuries, read it slowly. Who is cursed? Not Ham. Canaan, Ham's son. The text says Ham did it, and Canaan is cursed. That has puzzled readers for millennia. But whatever it means, notice what it does not say. It says nothing about skin, nothing about race, nothing about Africa, not one word. For centuries, people who wanted to own other people twisted this passage into a so-called curse of Ham. There is no curse of Ham in the Bible. There is a curse of Canaan. And Canaan, to the first readers of Genesis, meant one specific thing: the nations Israel would later face in the land. This is a story about them. It is not a license. It never was. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. And then, the account closes the way chapter 5 closed. Noah lived 350 years after the flood. All the days of Noah were 950 years. And he died. There it is again. The hammer from chapter 5. Death is still here. The water washed the world. It did not wash the heart. And within 2 chapters, humanity is on a plane in Shinar, building a tower up into heaven. Right back to crossing the boundary. Right back where chapter 6 started. So what was it all for? Here's the shape of the whole thing. Creation, uncreation, recreation. God separates the waters, and the world is born. God lets the waters back in, and the world dies. Then the Spirit hovers over the water again. The dry land rises again. Life comes out again. And a man walks onto clean ground with a blessing in his ears and a broken heart in his chest. Genesis is telling you that God can rebuild the world, and that rebuilding the world is not enough. Something deeper than the world has to be dealt with. Something inside the 8 people who were on that boat. And that is why the rest of the Bible keeps reaching back for this story. Jesus said the days of the Son of Man would be like the days of Noah, people eating, drinking, marrying, ordinary, unaware, until the flood came and swept them all away. Not a warning about the weather, a warning about sleepwalking. And Peter reaches back too. 8 persons, he says, were brought safely through water. And then he calls that water a picture of baptism, going down into it and coming up alive. The same water that ends the old world is the water you walk out of into a new one. So look at the ark one more time, and do not see a zoo. See a box sealed with a covering that a righteous man enters and a doomed world does not. See a door that God himself shuts from the outside and no one can open. See a wind moving over dark water, doing exactly what it did on the first page of the Bible. See a bird coming back with a green leaf, and a man reaching out his hand to take her in. See a war bow, unstrung, hanging in the clouds, aimed away from us forever. And then see the last scene. A tent. An old man, exposed. 2 sons walking backwards with a cloak held between them. Because that is the honest ending. Even the last righteous man on earth walked off that ark and needed to be covered. Noah's father named him Relief and hoped he would undo the curse of the ground. He didn't. The ground was blessed again, and the man was still broken. The flood was never the answer. It was the question asked at the top of God's voice. And the whole rest of the Bible is the long, patient answer to it.